Joe Biden, currently the president of the United States, formerly a senator. Why am I telling you what he was formerly? I don't know. But anyway, Joe Biden, currently the president, released a statement in regards to COVID and Ukraine. I am more interested in the COVID portion of this statement, so let's read. 10 days ago, I sent Congress an urgent proposal to provide needed military, economic, and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. The plan was substantial in size because the need is substantial. We must stand by Ukraine as it defends itself from Russian aggression. All right, so far so good. But let's get into this COVID stuff. Like, what's he's going to talk about COVID? The need is also urgent. I've nearly exhausted the resources given to me by a bipartisan majority in Congress to support Ukraine's fighters. This aid has been critical to Ukraine's success in the battlefield. We cannot allow our shipments of assistance to stop while we await further congressional action. We are approximately 10 days from hitting this critical deadline. So he needs funding for Ukraine, right? But he also needs funding for COVID. Again, the White House is still officially covering up the amount of COVID deaths. According to the White House, we are nearly approaching 1 million, though. By the estimated sum of every state government and local government, we've reached 1 million several months ago. I covered that in a previous video, but let's keep going. Previously, I'd recommended Congress take overdue action on much-needed funding for COVID treatments, vaccines, and tests as part of the Ukraine supplemental bill. However, I have been informed by congressional leaders on both parties that such an addition would slow down action on the urgently needed Ukrainian aid. Think about this, though. Republicans, they're fine with sending a bunch of military contracts, right, to contractors, right, ostensibly for good reason, right, Ukraine needs weapons, right, they're fighting a fucking war, right, and they're doing a pretty good job. I support the war effort in Ukraine. I think that Ukraine has a right to defend itself, but it's interesting that, again, who is getting paid? When we talk about funding for Ukraine, where are these funds going, right? It's not like, they're dropping like fucking caches of $100 bills in Ukraine. What they're doing is they're contracting military companies, the military industrial complex, Raytheon and so forth, in the United States domestically, paying them to manufacture weapons to send to Ukraine. So again, Republicans are only interested in Ukraine because they can pay their donors via weapons contracts, right? And you can't really do the similar things with COVID. And so that's interesting, right? So again, it's not about doing what's right. It's not about helping people with Republicans or Democrats for that matter, let's be honest. It's about how can I pay my donors, right? So if you can accidentally stumble upon something that's morally, not terrible, and also pay your donors, you're winning. But if you stumble upon something that's morally necessary, but you can't pay your donors with that, why bother? Why bother? Let's just let people die. Bodan in the chat says, I've been tracking U.S. COVID deaths and noticed the number hasn't been rising or it's very slow. That's because the entire government has covered up what counts as a COVID case and what counts as a death. The CDC basically completely stopped tracking cases in April. Joe Biden declared victory from COVID in March during the State of the Union. The CDC stopped tracking cases. They only track cases if it's, quote, a hospitalization. So you can test positive. That's not a case of COVID. No. You need to be on your deathbed in order for it to be a case, right? Because they just changed the definitions of words. So yeah, again, Joe Biden right now is to the right of Donald Trump and to the right of Ron DeSantis on COVID. Joe Biden's COVID policy and his CDC is to the right of Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. I said that 2 times because for emphasis. Let me be clear, as vital as it is to help Ukraine combat Russian aggression, I wouldn't even say combat Russian aggression. I mean, fucking Ukraine is fighting off a goddamn full-scale invasion of their country. Russian aggression is like fucking Putin going like, you're a little stinky over there, right? Like, that's aggression. That's aggressive, right? Like a full-scale fucking invasion, right? Trying to destroy the country and destroy the fucking concept of Ukraine as a nationality. That's not aggression. That's just straight up fucking evil, right? But anyway, let's go on. It is equally vital to help Americans combat COVID. Without timely COVID funding, more Americans will die needlessly. We will lose our place in line for America to order new COVID treatments and vaccines for the fall, including next-generation vaccines under development. Now, once again, the White House has estimated 100 million cases in fall and winter. So, and that's without the funding. Now, I don't know if that's 100 million hospitalizations, right? The case metric for the CDC, because they changed positive test being a case, which logical, right? You test positive, you have a case of coronavirus. Now the CDC says you have to be in the hospital in order for it to be a case, right? So is that 100 million hospitalizations or is that 100 million cases? Who knows? The CDC just fucked up all the messaging and now everyone's lost when it comes to these definitions. So good job, CDC. Good job, Biden administration. And unable to maintain our supply of COVID tests. In the fall, we are hit by new variants. If we are hit by new variants, it will be too late to get the tools needed for protection. Critical treatments that will be available in Europe, but not the United States. In addition, our effort to help lower income countries get COVID vaccines into arms will stall. There is no effort for that. Let's be honest. Joe Biden said that he was going to try to waive vaccine patents. He never tried to do that. He's a fucking piece of garbage. He is a global apartheid eugenicist. Joe Biden is to the right of Donald Trump on COVID. Now, again, that's not when it comes to patents. Donald Trump loved the patents too, right? Like, you know, corporate America loves corporations, right? But again, it needs to be understood that Joe Biden is lying to everyone all the time about COVID. Everything he says, assume the opposite is correct. He doesn't give a shit about global vaccine distribution. If he did, he would waive vaccine patents, right? But he's not doing that because he doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't care. He doesn't fucking care at all, right? The only reason they want this funding is just for his fucking, it's just for his optics, right? He wants people to think that he's doing something when in reality, he's doing nothing, okay? Let's be honest about that. Critical, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So I call on Congress to pass the Ukrainian supplemental funding bill immediately and get it to my desk in the next few days. And then I urge Congress to move promptly on the COVID funding bill. This virus knows no borders. We must continue to save lives here at home and around the world. Like, I want to be very clear. COVID is killing more people than the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's just a fact. Now, am I saying that we should judge priorities based on who dies the most? My opinion is we should do all of the above. We should help Ukrainians defend their country as well as help Americans recover from the COVID crisis. But it needs to be understood that morally speaking, the idea that Joe Biden is delinking this stuff and saying, all right, they're going to pass the Ukraine funding. We know the Republicans aren't going to pass COVID funding unless it gives a big amount of money to their pharmaceutical donors, right? We're fucked. COVID in this country has won. When Joe Biden declared victory in the State of the Union this year, he ostensibly declared victory from COVID. But what he really was declaring was victory for COVID. COVID has won, right? COVID is going to be a part of humanity now because of the actions of Donald Trump and Joe Biden and their corrupt governments, as well as corrupt governments all across the globe, such as, you know, Brazil's got a horrible time of it right now with Bolsonaro. India's having multiple crises with Modi in there. And then, of course, Europe is struggling in a lot of places, especially the UK right now is going through a giant surge with their fucking bozo goofball Boris Johnson in there. And, you know, Russia, who knows what Russia's going with COVID numbers. People have done analyses of Russian COVID reporting, found out that the numbers are almost entirely unreliable. They're just making it up. You can't trust Russian COVID numbers in the same way you can't trust the United States COVID numbers because both countries lie all the time. The United States covers up all of their crimes all the time. So does Russia. They're both evil countries with disgusting and corrupt leaders. And so that needs to be understood here. They don't care. Joe Biden doesn't give a shit. He doesn't care if you die. He doesn't care if your grandma dies. He doesn't care if your kid dies. He doesn't give a shit. And in fact, right, he's using this as a political, like, you know, optics round. He's like, oh, let me weaponize COVID, not to actually help anyone, but to get people the impression that I'm helping them or want to help them theoretically. He doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't care. And neither do Republicans in Congress, and neither do Democrats in Congress. None of them care about anything. They don't care about you. They don't care about your family. They don't care about you being able to feed your kids. They don't care about you being able to pay your rent. They don't fucking care about you at all. Not a single fucking politician gives a fuck. Not a single politician gives a fuck about anything that you have to say, about anything that your kids have to say or would have to say, if they didn't die in a school shooting, if they didn't die from a fucking plague, if they didn't die from other sorts of accidents and stuff that are completely preventable in this society. But anyway, that's Joe Biden, his statement on Ukraine and COVID. I'm gonna say we'll probably get the COVID, or we'll probably get the Ukraine funding, because again, Republicans only support that because they can give contracts to their donors. And the COVID funding, if it passes, it would only pass if it is done so in a way that again funds the specific amounts of people's donors. Like Joe Manchin, he might be, he might be willing to pass COVID funding if he gets to write the entire bill and dictate where the money goes. Because that's how our country works.